Oh, do we need three? We need three hose clamps, don't we?
One.
Oh, just one?
Yeah.
Oh, just for the bottom one. Oh, okay.
Just for the...
Okay, well then I have one too many.
Now, did you make up some hooks? I've actually done this with just using lots of masking tape to hold the Kevlar in place as you're starting the lash.
When you didn't have
clips. But you go through a lot of masking tape. It's much easier. You know, you'll make up get a few hose clamps, get a bunch of clips, and then you'll have them, and you just use them over and over again.
You want the J basically
Perpendicular.
to the T like this.
Right, yeah.
Okay. You just lucked out on the first one. And did
You lucked out on the first one.
Okay. This is going to be our lashing crew because everybody's watching how I
Okay, so we got... Okay. This is about right. Screwdriver for this? Pliers will do for the moment.
What is it, Phillips or standard?
Standard.
There's also
Yeah, he just needs to use them.
yeah. If you want to get it tight, we actually have the strap kit.
We're not going to go very tight with this.
Okay. The ratchet just works a lot better than the screwdriver on those.
Yeah.
I have it set up somewhere, but I misplaced it.
So that's basically equally spaced around the circle?
2 groups of 3.
2 groups of 3?
That's what I'm doing here.
Okay. On opposite sides, I assume?
Yes. And this is just a way to temporarily hold them in place while I get the thing on and tight. We're mostly just waiting for the epoxy to cure. Almost. Give it another couple minutes. It's a high sol epoxy. You know, at least around the edges. You know, it can be something.
I've got it. I've got it. I mean, that's what I was going to use for the ribs too, right? Or do you think that's overkill? Should we just use the laminating epoxy for the ribs to the
spars?
Yeah.
Those cartridges are awfully convenient. I mean, it's not cheap, but it's really
just because you can squeeze the stuff out. Yeah.
And you get it where you want it, and you can get into corners. And
instead of having to take one of those and trying to spatula it off.
Yeah. So, but if you took that and, you know, whatever you use for the balsa wood plug to the tube joint, you know, 5 minutes is fine for that. It can be slower. You know, if you're jigging up a whole fuselage frame, you want something slower so you have working time.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no reason you couldn't do the whole thing with E20 or E120 ISOL. But I think if you've got a reasonable fit on these joints and you glue it with the Hysol, then you're starting out with fundamentally a really good bond. And then the lashing just helps on top of that.
Right.
But my guess is on these carbon tubes, you know, 5-minute epoxy, 15-minute hobby level epoxy just isn't going to stick to them. So.
By the way, I got the applicator in, which is like a $50 part for the high salt thing, and I think that I brought it in here. And
Yeah.
it may have got cleaned up during our cleanup somewhere. It looks kind of like a
There's
double
one-
barrel gun thing with a
Yeah.
little squeeze grip. Do you have
And
any idea where that ended up?
No.
We might spend some time later today looking and seeing if we can find it, because otherwise I'll have to order another one. I've got the mixing nozzles and I have the cartridges for both the
Okay.
E20 and E120, but I'm out of.
Yeah.
I saw the applicator, but I don't know where it went to. I'm pretty sure I brought it in. It's not at my house. That far away. Oh, we're going to cut the excess off.
Yeah, you want some excess here so you can put
Tension.
the Kevlar where you really want it. So you're just going to persuade.
Making sure. These wheels are not roll very well with these red chairs. You changing how the pins fit in, or one came out?
Oh, they weren't spaced right.
Or? No.
So did you have some clamps made up with the pins epoxy in place?
Or they were just hooked. If you have one that has enough of these all the way around, you just can hook into those.
Yeah.
You know, once you figure out where you want all the hooks, it's pretty simple. Okay. So what we end up doing here, it helps you have some place to hold this. I'm just going to start out with.
Before you do that, let me just make sure I've got all the aluminum dust off of this.
Yeah, to be proper about this, you'd be doing it with gloves, and you would do an alcohol wipe on the tubes before you start. And
I did an alcohol wipe right before I did the sanding, but I did not do the alcohol wipe after the sanding, so there may be some aluminum dust. So what kind of knot did you tie on there?
doesn't matter, it's getting thrown away.
Oh, it's part that gets cut off, okay. Starting on one of the end ones or the middle one?
And one.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is we just go back
Right at the edge. Okay.
and forth.
Now to the same one. Okay.
Yeah, so this is something we're having it on.
Having it wide and laying flat helps in speed.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so basically you want the end clips to line up with the edge of the tube.
The end clips?
Yeah, the hooks.
You're just trying to get a reasonable. Hit the hook properly. The problem with the Kevlar is that you have little filaments going everywhere. Okay, here we go. So you're just trying to get it to lie reasonably smoothly across here. And if you want to, I mean, you can, if you know how strong the Kevlar is.
Hey, you guys.
Hi. Filming.
You're on video.
If you know how strong your Kevlar is, you can sort of figure out how much material you need to have here to take the tension in the joint. And you figure out what you need, and then you like triple it, because it doesn't add very much weight. Anyway, so these hooks are just a way to let you do this. And if you feel this, there's moderate tension in there.
Okay.
Now the tension's going to go up real shortly now.
And so you put like 2 loops per hook, right? So there's probably.
Whatever. It depends how many hooks you have, and
Oh, this is where you're talking about the tension going up.
yeah.
And then you go around it and you go back.
Yeah, so these are giving you
And are you trying to space that out as well, the radial one?
yes.
So
So
that-
you just go around in a figure 8. So if you've got something like a fuselage frame, what you end up sort of doing is you clamp the thing up vertically. You have one person on each side, and you're passing
hand it back and forth.
You're just handing it back and forth to go around all of these.
And so you're building that one up the pole, basically.
Right.
The same as you're going side to side. You're kind of going out.
Mm-hmm. And these actually give you a moderate amount of bending stiffness this way. But your goal here is trying to wrap it so that you're not letting the Kevlar bunch up too much. You want it so you can still get the epoxy to saturate it. So that's probably about enough for that kind of wrap. And then you just finish it off
Going around a bunch of times.
a bunch of times. And what you're trying to do with this is hold these toes up against this so they can get a good bond, and just get enough bond area in this that when it's saturated with resin, it can take all of the tension loads and get it transferred into the tube. So again, you're just trying to let the Kevlar sort of smear out into a relatively thin.
Is that cord porous at all, or are you counting on it going in between the little cracks between the...
It goes in between. So I would do the saturation of this like with MGS and a heat gun.
So it gets really
really
non-viscous.
really non-viscous, and you will see as it saturates, because even the Kevlar will change color. If you were doing glass, it would totally change color. But then the Kevlar isn't.
And so you're brushing it on and then applying a heat gun at the same time?
Yep. So then to terminate this, I just do a somewhat coarser spiral and take some masking tape and just wrap it to hold the end in place. Oh, it's a low tack one. Yeah. Okay, so now you just need something that can cut Kevlar to cut.
Shears are right there.
This.
I'm busy right now. I'll call back.
So, as long as your tape joint is pretty good, this can stay like this for quite a while before you saturate it. And then when you're ready, you just heat gun and epoxy, let it cure, and then what will happen is the Kevlar is far stronger than the epoxy. So you can actually, once you get the end of this free, you can completely unwrap it once it's saturated with the epoxy.
Uh-huh.
So what I would do is take like a razor blade and you just sort of press down and you peel the Kevlar back until it cuts. And then you just trim up all the loose ends that way.
After it's cured.
After it's cured.
Yeah.
So do you recommend epoxying the joint first for kind of a setup?
Yeah.
And then
That just holds it together.
Yeah, and then wrap multiple joints, however clamps you make up,
Yeah.
and then do the epoxy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So how long did it take you to epoxy lash and epoxy a fuselage? There's 10 joints or something like that?
Yeah, a couple people. A couple hours. Once everything is all tack glued and it's all lined up.
What about
It's still not like.
Okay, so if you're doing a big tube, big cross tube, small tube coming into it, which is a pretty common setup.
right?
Same basic arrangement. When you do the initial Kevlar around it, it's not going to be coming into the little tube. As soon as you start doing the figure 8 lashing, you're going to try to pull it in. If you can manage to pull it in, fine. If not, loosen this up just a little bit
Mm-hmm.
and do the wrapping and let that pull it in.
Because you have to make sure the Kevlar is touching the.
touching
Yeah, you want the Kevlar going all the way around and then touching, but you're going to rely on these wraps to pull the
pull it
Kevlar in to do it. So that one's, once you've done equal size joints, that one's pretty easy. Not quite the way you want to start out though.
What about angles?
When you have angles, your issue is holding these wraps in place. Everything else is going to be the same, but the initial tension wrappings are going to want to slide. So one thing you can do is, if your joint is this way, you start at this end, and you just use some CA and you tack glue the Kevlar down.
Just tack a little teeny, like the
Yeah,
very
right
crown
along
of
this edge.
Yeah, the crown.
And you just tack that a little bit, and then the next ones sort of lay on that. And if you hit it wrong, they're all going to pop loose. But, use your judgment, tack glue it a little bit as needed, and you can hold everything in place that way. For the first one, you could even put a stick of something that the glue's not going to really stick to.
Just so it doesn't slide.
Yeah, just to keep it from sliding when you start. And then the rest of it is exactly identical. And then when you get a multiple tube at a time joint, what you end up doing is for each of the tubes coming in, you do the tension wraps separately. They may end up wanting to be one on top of the other a little bit. Use your judgment as to which way is the right sequence to do it. And then when you do the figure 8 wrap, you just go around all of the tubes. You just snake around all of them. And so you know, work around one, work around the next one, and you just continue the figure 8.
I don't know if we have, in our design, if we have any situations where there are multiple tubes coming together.
A common one on a frame is when you have like an upright tube, a horizontal tube, and a diagonal
Yeah, I guess that's
tube.
right. We have the down tube, what we call the down tube, the seat tube, and the chain tube are all coming in together.
Right.
Okay.
Could you lash,
did
lash
you
one
do
first
that
and then lash, and then do another lash on
We
top of that?
always did them
Together?
together.
Okay.
I don't remember, I've got how I've terminated in my model, but probably what I did is I had one of them, you know, mitered up onto the other tube right into the corner, and then the other one just coming
Yeah, and
straight
usually
in.
one of those, the
Is a
diagonal
T.
tube coming in is smaller.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know, actually, you want to do them all at once because your figure 8 lash, you want to go around all of them.
Okay.
You know, it would be hard. It'd be very hard to just do one of those tubes with the figure 8 lash because the other one's in the way. So,
Well, unless you could do the 90-degree first, and then put the tube.
yeah,
in.
but
but you want carbon to carbon.
you've got this in the way of your joint
Joint,
there.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you want to put the whole frame together, and then once it's all done and all the tack gluing is set up, then you go do your lashing.